Great to see so many people here. Julia, you do such an amazing job every year of putting this event together. It's incredible to see it. So yeah, massive congratulations to you and the team. Yeah, I want to talk about UKSIF, what we're doing, where things are at. But more importantly, what I want to talk about is what's going on in the country at the moment, because we have a government that thinks that we're leading the world on sustainability, on net zero, on the transition. But I think they're wrong, and I think they actually know that they're wrong, and I think that more damagingly, we are obviously in a global competition for capital. Every country in the world is fighting to attract the capital, the huge amounts of private capital that they need to drive forward the sustainability transition, to advance and win in the industries of the future that are going to move us forwards and make our economy as strong in a net zero world as it has been in the fossil fuel world. And I'm afraid I think the UK is being seriously left behind, and I think that a lot of that has to do with government policy, which is failing to bring investor confidence that we need in order to move things forward. We've seen, obviously, the United States has the Inflation Reduction Act, the EU has got its Green Deal moving forward. Here in the UK, what do? Well, my thoughts are, if you are, for example, a global battery factory manufacturer or manufacturer of electric vehicle batteries, and you want to think about, I'm going to build a factory for my electric batteries somewhere in the world, where will I choose? Well, first of all, you could probably get an intern on the case, and within half an hour of Googling, they'll be able to tell you exactly to the penny of what you would get if you put your battery plant in the US. If you got that same intern, or maybe someone with a bit more ability to read EU jargon, you'd probably find out within a few hours what you might get if you put your battery factory in the EU. What would happen if you came to the UK and you wanted to find out how the government would support you here? Well, first of all, you've got to figure out how to navigate the planning challenges. You've got to figure out how to navigate the grids and other things. You've got to work with government officials over a period probably of many months to try and understand what bespoke package might be given to you. And you've got to hope and pray that a by-election comes along that means that the government is desperate to make an announcement. That is not a way to drive investment into the industries that we know are going to be central and crucial for the future of this country. So we think and we believe that the UK is seriously falling behind in bringing you guys, us, financial services together to allow us to create the conditions to allow us to invest. And I think what we need to figure out is, what is it that the UK's economy wants to be in the world that's net zero? And we don't have the luxury that America has. They are such a huge economy, huge country, that they can, broadly speaking, choose, or not have to choose, sorry. They don't have to choose which areas of the economy they want to be strong in. They can, broadly speaking, subsidize everything, see what sticks, and then move forwards with that as the base of a net zero economy. We don't have that luxury. We need to choose. And I think that's where government needs to take some proper vision, show some leadership, move the agenda forwards, and pick some core industries that we might win at. We're never going to be the world's leader in manufacturing solar panels, for example, so let's not bother. We should look at the things that we really can be and should be a leader, and my view is that we should seriously think about sustainable finance and the sustainable finance industry, many of that is in this room, as being a core part of Britain's economy in the net zero world. We should be financing the world's transition from here. And that could be a massive boom for the UK, and something that builds on our skills as a financial services powerhouse. How do we do that? Well, starting by being one of the best places in the world to do green finance, creating the regulatory environment that allows us to move forwards properly, but allows us to move forward easily, effectively, but in the right direction. But it also means having the right policies at home to create investment. Who's going to build a battery plant if no one here is buying electric cars? Who's going to build a boiler or heat pump manufacturing facility if there's no incentive for people to install them in their own homes here? We need to make sure that we have the policies in place. And that's why we've been so frustrated with the announcements over the last few weeks. We feel that investors and others have been marched up the hill and then let down at the last minute. We've responded to the government quite robustly, saying exactly this. We wrote a letter to government, to the Prime Minister. It was published in the Times, many of you may have seen it, and it got a really good write-up there because it's a really strong message. £1.5 trillion of investors telling the Prime Minister directly and very publicly that this is damaging investor confidence, and that clarity and certainty are the essential ingredients for investor confidence. And if you don't have investor confidence, why would we invest in the UK when we could invest elsewhere? We followed up after the recent announcements with a letter, this time jointly with PRI and IRGCC, who are great partners of ours, basically saying the exact same thing and saying you talked about this announcement, now you've made this announcement. The investor confidence issues have not gone away. In fact, the announcement makes it, of course, much worse, and that got also a lot of media coverage. And so we are, I think, in a strange place as UKSIF that we've not been before, where we're fighting on this big picture politics rather than focusing on the regulatory environment as much as we have done. And one of the interesting reasons for that, I think, is that the regulations, if you assume, it's a bold assumption, but if you assume that the full green finance strategy announced in March is going to be delivered in full, we're not fully there, but we're going a really good way into having the regulatory landscape that we want and that we need, and that we as UKSIF have been calling for more than 30 years. We've said, bring the regulations in and sustainable finance will flourish in this country. And of course, it is flourishing in many respects. What do we now need from the green finance strategy? Well, it talked about creating a green taxonomy. Where's that? We're likely to see an announcement from the GTAG over the next few days talking about GTAG's impressions on the future of the green taxonomy. We need to push government to get that taxonomy out. We are hearing that the government is passionate and committed to ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board's recommendations on corporate disclosures. What has the government done? Well, they've set up a Go Slow expert group to move it forwards, but we need that to be accelerated so that can be brought into law quickly. We've talked about transition plans. In fact, it was Rishi Sunak as Chancellor that announced that there'd be transition plans across the economy. I think very soon we're going to see the results of the Transition Plan Task Force. That needs to quickly be brought into UK corporate disclosure law, all because these help create the frameworks and the environment that allow us to invest in the sustainable policy, in the sustainable transition, and the companies that are driving it forwards. We're also focusing on fiduciary duties. That was a smaller part of the strategy, and that we think would have a huge impact. We spoke to government about this just the other day, and said if the government ministers just clarified that fiduciary duties in the UK means that you should be actively focusing on ESG, both risks and impacts, and to cascade that government clarification of fiduciary duties down through the regulators, including the FCA and TPR for pensions, that would create a difference and a change in how ESG is being worked on inside the financial service industry. Government seems interested in that, but again, how interested, how do we get them to move forward further and faster? So in UKSIF, we've built up over the last few months our public affairs and communications team. We have a new head of public affairs for the first time. We have a media relations manager for the first time. We're really excited to bring these roles into the organization. And there's three things that we're focusing on. The first, as I mentioned, is getting the green finance strategy delivered. Our concern is that if this government doesn't get most of that done before the election, that another government coming in, another parliament coming in, may decide that that was somebody else's green finance strategy. We want to make our own. Before we know where we are, the risk is that it's 2027 and we don't have any of these things implemented. We know what needs to be done here. The second objective of our work in this space is to try and counter the sort of ESG backlash that we've seen in the US. We do not want anything like that coming to the UK. It's been hugely damaging, hugely polarizing, purely politics rather than reflecting the reality either of public opinion on the ground or of investor opinion. We want to make sure that at all costs we avoid having that sort of backlash here. What we're seeing, instead of an ESG backlash, we're seeing a net zero backlash. And I think that those things are brought together by very similar groups of vested interests. I think we need to counter that, and that's what we're doing. The third thing that we're focusing on is, of course, the general election. In case you hadn't noticed, we are due to have an election soon. It could be, though, as much as a year away, so we've all got another year of this to look forward to. Of course, that will fall roughly the same time as the US election as well, so that's going to be joyous. And I think the thing is, we have to make sure that all the political parties are strongly aware of what we want to see and how we want things to move forwards on sustainable finance. On the one hand, that means creating the regulatory environment. But as I mentioned earlier, there's not necessarily a huge amount more to do on that in the immediate term. But it also means that we need to reflect on, okay, so we have a lot of the regs in place. Why is the finance still not flowing in the way that we want it to flow? Why are projects still struggling? Why are corporates still not transitioning? What is happening? And so we are working now specifically on 3 areas of the wider real economy. That is buildings, transport, and energy, the 3 biggest emitting areas of the UK, to try and create a set of core policies that if government can bring those in, or if a future government can make some key changes, it will have a really big impact on the ability of the UK to attract the private capital that we need to advance the transition. And so over the coming months, we're going to be publishing various reports on these. They're not just reports with our opinion, and that's really important. They're reports that are going to be backed up with economic data, with polling, with understanding of what this might do to the... am I okay? Yeah. What this might do to Julia was sneaking up behind me. What this might do to the economic prosperity of the whole of the UK, not just of London. And so this is what we're going to be working on. This is what we're doing now. We're really excited about this. We're having a lot of meetings with politicians. I was at Tory conference this week. Next week I'm going to Labour conference. We've also been at Lib Dem conference, because we need to get these messages out there and we need to make these arguments. And that's what we're doing on behalf of you guys, the financial service industry, our members, and we're really pleased to be doing it. We're also doing a lot of work at the international and European level as well. Just to very quickly talk about that, UKSIF, we're members of, very proud to be part of UKSIF, even after Brexit. In fact, I think it's more important that we're part of UKSIF now. The EU has an election coming up this year as well, or next year as well. There is a concern that that will actually reduce substantially the number of green-focused MEPs in the European Parliament. What does that mean for the European sustainable regulatory agenda, which we all know has been quite challenging? And we are very pleased, actually, recently to see that the SFDR has started to think about how does SFDR become more usable, how does it make more sense, how does the fund label move away from this Article 6, 8, and 9 challenge that we've seen. And so we are very pleased that the EU is recognizing the hard work that's been done in the UK. I've been proud to be part of that. I'm really pleased with what the FCA has come up with. I'm looking forward to hearing from Sarah in a minute, but also really looking forward to seeing the regulations finalized, hopefully in the next few months. That way we can actually get moving with this and start this fund label journey off. And in a minute, I'm going to show you some polling data that shows how important this is. The EU likely to be also focusing on CSRD and ESRS, sorry for all these horrible acronyms. If anyone shows a red card, I will willingly take it. And the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive is coming up. I'm going to, red card. Okay, so the CSRD is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That's the corporate reporting. ESRS is the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. There you go. I'm not a UKSIF employee. We leave that to UKSIF for a very good reason. But there is a lot of four-letter acronyms being introduced in the EU. We've got I think as the UK, we've lost our ability as a government to make changes on those. That's why we're part of UKSIF, because we can feed into that. And as a result, we're able to feed our members' views into that in a UK view. I'm also just become chair of the Global Sustainable Investment Alliance. That is the network of all the SIFs of the world, so it includes Europe, us obviously, but also the US, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and others. And we, every 2 years, publish a big report looking at the size and nature of the global sustainable finance industry. That report's being produced right now, and it will be published just in time for COP. And we're planning to make some core policy recommendations and really kind of get a voice raised, raising the voice of sustainable finance on the international level. We think that's so important, and our hope is that in future, as we're able to build up more resource for this global initiative, that we're able to attend COPs, we're able to be part of this international debate and raise the important voice of sustainable finance at the international level. Not least, we know that at COP26, there was an amazing announcement called GFANZ, which was $130 trillion of assets, global assets under management, committing to be net zero over in the fullness of time. Brilliant announcement. What are these funds going to invest in? What is there to invest in that's net zero? If you wanted to move $130 trillion of assets from what is in now to things that are net zero, You can't do it right now. So what is the pathway for making that happen? And what is the role of each different stakeholder, including governments, including the international community, in making that announcement or that commitment possible? Okay, talked a bit about the bigger political issues. I'm going to talk about now some of the polling that we've done, which we do every year for Good Money Week, and we're really proud to once again be able to continue this on. And the first one that we've got is our longitudinal study. Now, honestly, I don't like this question, but we've been asking it since 2009, so we continue to ask it because it does give some sort of insight and data. The question is, considering how and where you invest, are you more interested in making a positive difference to the world, through to are you more interested in making financial returns? Now, of course, the reason I don't like this question is because it suggests there's a binary divide between making a difference and making returns. We know that that's not, that there's much more nuance to it than that. Nevertheless, this is the question we've been asking. Now, what have we seen? Since 2009, obviously, the number of people at the top line, which is the only or mostly interested in financial returns, has dropped sharply. It was 3/4. Was now less than half. What's happening? We're in a cost of living crisis. People are thinking more about their money. They're thinking about their finances. That has ticked up slightly. I think what's interesting, though, is if you look at the white line at the bottom, that's the people that say don't know. And curiously, the don't know line almost exactly mirrors the people the change in people saying they're only interested in returns. So it's not like people are saying they've gone from only interested in returns to suddenly wanting to save the world. They've gone into a place where they don't fully know exactly what they think and what they want to think and how they want to invest their money. And that's a running theme throughout some of this data that I'm going to show you in a minute. I think, though, as times get hard, people's views crystallize more, and you go from don't know to being back to the kind of financial concern side. So it's hard to know how much to read into this graph, particularly when the question is not really the question we'd want. But because it's such a longitudinal study, we still include it in our polling. The next question we asked this year was thinking about values, asking people what values they would like to reflect in their investment decisions. Now, nobody put more than 50, there's no individual value that more than half of people wanted to reflect, but I think what's really interesting here, you've got climate change, you've got working conditions, human rights, and also animals, nature, and biodiversity all getting in the 40s in this graph. This tells me really, really strongly that the SDR and fund labeling system is going to be really successful and really powerful, because we know, and I'm sure you guys see this, people come in and ask for their investments to be in line with their values. People recognize that their values in normal life are not different from their values in their financial life. These things should be aligned and coming together. And I think that's been one of the big shifts in the last few years. And I think you could probably take from this, and I want to go and do a whole lot more analysis and dig all these stats together. But I think you can take from this that if you put together a fund, a sustainably labeled fund, and bearing in mind the UKSDR, one of its strengths is that as a fund manager, you can decide and determine which part of the sustainable piece you're going to be focused on. So you could have, I think, a fund that is trying to have a positive impact on human rights, whether that's to improve it as a sustainable improvers fund, whether that's to focus on it and have it purely as assets that are doing something really good already in that space. So I'm really positive about this slide. I think this shows that there's a huge market for the sustainably labeled products, and that goes along with the wider insight that we've got from across our membership, which is that sustainably labeled funds are not just a retail issue, that there's a lot of institutional investors really interested in this too. We did a back-of-envelope poll with our top pension fund, or biggest pension fund members, collectively having assets of over $1 trillion, and they told us that they were really interested in the sustainable labels, that they were interested partly because they're getting more and more communication from their savers and their investors that are saying, please make sure that my pension is invested sustainably, and they want to be able to go back to them and say, this is what we're doing to make that possible. So yeah, that's where we're at. Somehow I've just about run out of time, but I've got 4 more slides to show you. To what extent are you comfortable or not comfortable with your pensions being invested in companies which negatively impact the climate? If you take the net of the 2 not comfortable, you end up with 69% of people are uncomfortable with their investments being in assets that harm the environment. We did the same question for working conditions. Are you comfortable with your investments in companies which are treating your workers and customers badly? The net there was actually 70%. So 70% of people are uncomfortable with their pension being invested in things that will impact negatively on society. Do you want to put your pension into the oil and gas? It's a really important question, because oil and gas is making loads of money right now. It's really, really profitable. And yet still, people know that, people know how this is working out, and still, if you take out the don't knows, if you look at that, even if you don't take out the don't knows, almost half of people say they do not want their pension in oil and gas. I think these are really interesting statistics and give us things to reflect on. And actually, just building on that one, do you want your pension, if you had a choice of where your pension could be, in the renewables and clean energy or in oil and gas? Overwhelmingly, people want their pension to be in renewables. This stuff is, I think, really important findings. Final couple of questions. Do you think your pension is environmentally sustainable? Bearing in mind, people are really uncomfortable with their pension being invested in things that harm the environment or that harm working conditions. 58% of people don't know where their pension is, whether it's sustainable. So there's a disconnect between people's concern and comfort of where their investments are and what they know about them. And then finally, what's this one? Have you, and this is really important for this room, have you been made aware either by your financial advisor or your employer of the environmentally sustainable financial products that are available? And if you take out the not applicables, because this is people that maybe don't have, this isn't relevant to, you actually end up with 69% of people say they've not been made aware of the products, the environmentally sustainable products available. I think this reflects and showcases some of the challenges we have, but I think it also is a really positive picture of where people are at. This is not just us doing a survey of people we know. This is a YouGov poll of over 1,000 people across the country, representative sample, the sort of polls that you get that tell you how people want to vote. So this is a real snapshot of where people are at. We did the poll just over a week ago. So yeah, I hope that's really insightful. There's so much to do. And Julia, thank you for continuing to work so hard on this event and this whole agenda. And look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.